Hi gang, and welcome to Dr. Fitzgerald's Grammar Nuts and Bolts. Today is grammar issue number 5, comma usage, part 1. Let's get started. Commas are the most commonly used punctuation mark, and there are multiple situations in which a comma is appropriate, but the vast majority of comma errors that students make fall into just a few categories. So between parts 1 and 2 of this series, we're going to come up with 5 comma rules that account for about 95% of the comma errors that students make. And we'll add a 6th miscellaneous category. So let's start with rule number 1. Use a comma with a fanboys to link to independent clauses. We already saw this. The fanboys are the 7 coordinate conjunctions: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Remember this? I have a dog and his name is Rocco. Well, this is a run-on because we're linking 2 independent clauses with just one of the fanboys. We need to add a comma. However, if you are using a comma because you're trying to link 2 independent clauses, make sure they really are 2 independent clauses. Look at this. My niece likes lions and loves tigers. Yes, there's a fanboys in there, but you don't have 2 independent clauses, so you wouldn't put a comma in this sentence. Okay, so much for rule number 1. Here comes rule number 2. Use a comma after an introduction leading to an independent clause. Now, whether that introduction is a phrase or a clause, we don't care. But if there's an introduction that leads to an independent clause, we're going to follow it with a comma. Bear in mind, though, the intro itself cannot be an independent clause. Otherwise, we're more likely dealing with a rule number 1, trying to avoid a run-on sentence. Okay, so let's try one. Walking deeper into the woods, I soon realized that I was lost. I soon realized that I was lost is the independent clause. It's got our subject, I, and our verb, realized. So we would want to add a comma to this one. But how about this one? Walking deeper into the woods was probably a mistake. Well, the words "was probably a mistake" are not an independent clause. Therefore, we wouldn't put a comma after walking deeper into the woods in this case. How about this one? On the passenger side of my car, I discovered a huge dent. I discovered a huge dent, that's an independent clause, so everything coming before it is an intro. Let's add a comma. But again, look at this one. On the passenger side of my car was a huge dent. Was a huge dent is not an independent clause, so on the passenger side of my car is not an intro here. Okay, that takes care of the first 2 rules for commas. Use a comma with a fanboys to link 2 independent clauses, and after an introduction leading to an independent clause. We're going to add 2 more now. Between all items on a list of 3 or more. This one's pretty simple. The first time you use commas was probably to separate items on a list, but I want to call your attention to the words all items. That means, yes, even that second to last item needs a comma following it. It's sometimes called the Oxford comma. So if you have 4 items on a list, you're going to need 3 commas to separate them. And one more. Between coordinate adjectives, but not cumulative adjectives. Okay, I just felt you tense up, so let's talk about this. Here's a quick adjective lesson. Adjectives describe or modify nouns. So, a tall woman, a green car, a courageous child, a prideful cat, a luxurious result, and an elegant phrase, a sleeping dog, a cowardly lion. So tall, green, courageous, prideful, luxurious, and elegant, sleeping, and cowardly. These are all adjectives because they are modifying a noun. There is no limit to the number of adjectives that can describe any noun. So here's a noun: bears. 3 bears. 3 big bears. 3 big hairy bears. 3 big hairy brown bears. 1 noun, 4 adjectives. So rule number 4 is to use a comma between coordinate adjectives but not cumulative adjectives. This only comes into play if there are 2 or more adjectives standing to the left of a noun and modifying that noun. So what's the difference between coordinate and cumulative adjectives? Coordinate adjectives modify the noun separately. You have perhaps 2 adjectives modifying a noun, but they're doing so separately. Cumulative adjectives work together to modify the noun. So take a look at this sentence. Dr. Fitzgerald is a handsome, fascinating man. And this one. He enjoys dining at fine French restaurants. In both sentences, you have two adjectives modifying a noun. Handsome, fascinating is modifying man, fine French is modifying restaurants. But are they doing so in the same way? Actually, no. Handsome and fascinating are modifying man separately. One's not helping the other. But in fine French restaurants, fine and French are working together to modify restaurants. Now, if this seems a little confusing, fortunately there's a test, and we call it the and test. And what is the and test? Simply slip an and in between the two adjectives. Cumulative adjectives, you'll see, do not pass the and test. You can't put an and in between them. So let's try. Dr. Fitzgerald is a handsome and fascinating man. Does that sound grammatically okay? Sure. What that means is if you don't want the and, you're going to have to put a comma in between those two. But let's try the next one. He enjoys dining at fine and French restaurants. That doesn't sound right, and it changes the meaning of the sentence. It could be any kind of fine restaurant or any kind of French restaurant. So in the original, fine and French are working together. They're cumulative. You wouldn't put a comma in between them. So that's not so hard, is it? Just simply slip an and in between the adjectives and see if it sounds right. If it does, replace the and with a comma. If it doesn't, don't put anything in between the two adjectives. Okay, so just a quick review of the 4 rules we've learned so far. Use a comma with a fanboy to link two independent clauses. After an introduction leading to an independent clause. Between all items on a list of 3 or more. So let's make sure we put a comma after that second to last item. And between coordinate adjectives, but not cumulative adjectives. If it can pass the and test, you got coordinate adjectives, put a comma in there. If it can't pass the and test, don't put a comma in between. In commas part 2, we will be learning about one more major comma rule, and then we'll add a miscellaneous category. But for now, thank you for watching. Bye now.